Puhon. Departure, Saad Biyaya. Working draft, first final. The marina lay quiet under a heavy mantle of early morning fog that rolled off the shelf at dawn and turned the forest of aluminum masts into a thicket of gray ghosts. The air smelled of low tide, diesel exhaust, and wet cedar, with the rhythmic, metallic clinking of shroud lines against metal serving as the harbor's heartbeat. Here, tucked into the far end of the commercial slips where the working trawlers gave way to long-distance cruisers, the Saad Biyaya rode the black water with the rugged confidence of a vessel that had thrived in pelagic blue water, but was still sleek and light enough to glide over shallow reefs. Her freshly painted bottom and prominent transom drew the eyes of anyone who passed. The wood of her transom held a deep, mirrored gleam, the work of 2 years of dedication, craftsmanship, and love. From the seaward end of the dock ambled an old fisherman whose pace slowed, then stopped as the Saad Biyaya came into view. Hardly thinking about it, he reached into his shirt pocket and produced a rough, hand-rolled cigarette and grunted as he fixed it between his lips. Near the vessel was a stack of empty crates, so he pushed one aside with his foot and sat down to light up his smoke. He had the weathered, salt-cracked face of a man who had argued with every tide from Samar to Palawan and won most of them. As the cigarette dangling from his lips smoldered away, his eyes, milky but still sharp, traced the Saad Biyaya with the slow, knowing appraisal of someone who could read a hull the way others read the weather. While the prominent lettering on the transom might have captured the attention of most passers-by, his eyes moved past it to the construction beneath, the planking, the joinery, the way the wood had been worked. Amado moved along the dock at the pace of a man who had never needed to hurry for anything. Daniel followed with the loaded cart, wheels rattling softly. The fisherman didn't stand, he simply watched them approach, then gave a small upward tilt of his chin. They stopped at the stern. Daniel readied the totes to load them as Amado observed the old fisherman study the craft. Then the old man's gaze settled on the transom lettering. Saad Biyaya. Puhon. Bring her home. He read it slowly, his lips moving slightly over the Waray, then the English. He drew on his cigarette once, let the smoke go, and pursed his lips toward the transom, the small, unhurried gesture of a man who had never performed in his life. Gikan sa Samar ba? From Samar, right? Ang klase nining pagtukid. Molave pa gyud. That kind of construction, real molave. He studied the hull a moment longer, running his thumb along the rail where the planking met the transom. Dili ordinario ang nagpatijam nini. Whoever built this is not ordinary, he built more than just a boat. Amado climbed aboard without a word and barely a headshake that provided the smallest indication of acknowledgement, just enough to be polite before he found his place beside his daughter at the gunwale. As Daniel prepared to heave the first heavy tote aboard, the old fisherman stepped toward it, taking the handle alongside him. The two men hoisted it together, a stranger and a son-in-law finding the same rhythm by instinct. Up on deck, Amado and Crisanta Rosa received each crate side by side, his weathered hands and her quick ones moving in the same old cadence they had used 1,000 times on smaller boats, settling each weight into the hold without a wasted motion between them. Mope na hangin, the fisherman said, wiping his hands on his shirt when the last crate was stowed. Then his eyes moved to the transom one last time. He pursed his lips toward the English words, bring her home. He let them settle between the two men without explanation. Mopali Shah, Jindisenyo haya para gihapan pamali. Amado's jaw tightened. Something moved behind his eyes, pulled there by those 3 words, by what they meant and what they could not undo. An Iroy, he stopped. The word would not come further than that. The fisherman did not press. He simply stood there on the dock below, letting the silence hold what Amado could not say, his weathered face asking nothing and without a word, offering everything a man that had lived his life on that coast and its waters would offer. When Amado found his breath again, the fisherman spoke first, gently, as if closing a door so Amado would not have to. He ran a thumb along the gunwale, unhurried, sensing things there only a seasoned mariner might feel. Kini? He didn't finish the sentence. Just the thumb, moving slowly along the rail. Amado Magdayon? Amado nodded once, measured and quiet. Ang bangka sa akong ig agaw sa barangan. Dos años na. He paused, still tight, still true. Mayo imong gahimo, mopali siya. Amado managed a small nod and reached down from the gunwale. The old fisherman took his hand with the slow, firm hold of men who measure trust and respect by calluses and craftsmanship rather than words. Ising, he said quietly, giving his own name in return. He turned and started back up the dock, unhurried. A few steps on, his stride slowed. He glanced back once over his shoulder, and under his breath, almost too quiet to carry, Magdayon, the name settling into place. Amado Magdayon. Whatever final piece had clicked for him, he kept it to himself, and walked on, fading into the gray morning mist. Amado stood at the rail a moment longer, composing himself, his hand resting briefly on his daughter's shoulder before he climbed down to the dock himself. He looked at her, then at Daniel. Puhon, son. Bring her home, he said quietly, more to the boat than to either of them. Not as a conscious thought, but as habit when receiving a most important order, Daniel stood to attention and spoke in his most authoritative tone, "Yes, sir." "Yes, sir." Crisanta Rosa came to the rail and looked down at her father. Between them passed something that needed no translation, not in any language. She hauled her slender form deftly over the gunwale and stood before her father. They looked at each other for a long moment and then she embraced him even longer. But she knew her father needed to leave, needed space for privacy. As she let go, Amado pulled her back and kissed her tenderly on her forehead. Author note. Insert Waray exchange here, one sentence each. Amado, in a voice carefully measured so it would not tremble. Something like, "You cannot come home too soon. I am praying for you, Crisanta Rosa Magdayon." Needs native Waray speaker verification before finalizing. As he turned to leave, he lifted his hand, not quite a wave, more a release, and walked back up the dock the way Ising had gone, his shape going soft in the morning light until the mist took the rest of him. "Adios, tate," she said softly, to his retreating shape, to the space the mist was already filling. "Mag amping ka, palonga ta ikaw." The words came out the way they always did between them, not performed, just true as her breath. Crisanta Rosa kept her gaze fixed on the empty point where the fog had swallowed her father's silhouette. After a moment her chin lifted almost imperceptibly, the way Daniel had seen it lift before, when she would brace herself for that deepest wave of grief. He said nothing. He already knew what that meant. Daniel stepped closer, his boots making a soft thud on the deck planks. He stood just behind her right shoulder, close enough to support, but far enough to let her breathe. He laid his hand flat against the mahogany capping along the gunwale, feeling beneath the smooth oil the contours of the frame he had helped shape with his own hands. He did not reach for her. Not yet. Some moments are better witnessed than touched. Her breath shuddered out, slow, and her shoulders dropped a fraction of an inch. She didn't turn around, but she reached back and locked her fingers around his wrist. Her grip was strong yet soft. "He didn't look back once," she murmured, her voice steady but thin. "He didn't need to," Daniel replied softly, sliding his fingers down to meet hers. "He knows what's holding this boat together. He put his own hands in it. He didn't give you any money for the provisions, did he?" "No." A small huff of laughter escaped him. "Just 24 months of calluses in a hull that won't split. I think we're even." He paused, then added carefully, "Opo sir. Opo sir. Salamat, tate." The words were improving, but still carried a slight American weight on the Waray. She squeezed his hand. "Mas mayo na," she said quietly, almost to herself. Then she let go, turning back toward the cabin companionway with that smooth, natural shift of weight that made her look like an extension of the vessel itself. "We need to check the fuel-water separators before the tide turns. Help me with the hatch." Daniel followed her down into the companionway, the morning light narrowing to a pale seam above them as the hatch swung shut. "What time do we actually leave?" he asked, glancing at the chart table. Once the tide turns. Maybe an hour. She was already moving toward the galley, checking a strap on a crate of dry goods. Why, you hungry already? Starving. You do realize we haven't had breakfast yet? Ever since I arrived in Samar, the window opened and punctuality flew away. I hope you know how difficult that is for a naval officer. Welcome to Filipino time, Commander. I should think you would have adjusted by now. Whatever you say and whenever you can, as long as it's quick and as long as it's not fish, again. I'll fry some egg and rice, something quick before we go. Adobo can wait until tonight, once we're anchored. She turned from the stove with a look that was partly wounded and partly theatrical. Hoy, Commander Buyagan, you are on a Filipino boat, in Filipino waters, with a Filipino wife who knows how to cook 17 kinds of fish. She turned back to the eggs. Itlog lang for someone who is apparently afraid of the ocean's finest gift. I'm not afraid of fish. I just. Itlog, she said firmly, and that was the end of it. She cracked the eggs with practiced economy and said nothing more on the subject. Daniel came up behind her quietly, put his arms around her waist, and bent to speak near her ear. Fish will be fine, Cinta, if you must. You know I love your fish. He paused. After all, I did build you a dirty kitchen on the deck for a reason. She didn't turn around, but her shoulders relaxed almost imperceptibly, and after a moment she made a small sound that was almost a laugh, the kind a person makes when they've decided not to fight something they never really meant to fight in the first place. Itlog, she said again, more softly this time, and right away, Commander. Outside, through the small round window above the bunk, the climbing sun was already thinning the mist, the fog lifting off the water. By the time they ate, the tide had turned. Daniel coiled the last line on deck while Crisanta Rosa checked the engine gauges, and within the hour the Saad Biyaya was clear of the breakwater, her bow turned south, toward Bohol and the waters beyond.